Well, hello once again. Yes, this is me, Leonard Wells, broadcasting as usual from Haslingden, 30 miles or 45 or so kilometres due north of Manchester in the UK, on Saturday the 7th of January 2012. I see on the news today that it looks fairly certain that the government is going to spend 30 billion on building a high-speed railway from London to Birmingham. But it won't be ready until about 2030. Well, I think it's all codswallop and poppycock. Why do I think that? Well, if it's not going to be ready till 2030, and using the methods that they use today to run the railways, i.e. privatised, train companies bidding for the franchise, it will cost £1,000 to travel on that train by 2030. They're already charging £200 to travel from London to Manchester on a normal train, first class. So whatever the government thinks it's doing, I don't know, because our present railways haven't really changed a vast amount since the time of Brunel. In fact, in some areas we've gone backwards, because thanks to Dr. Beeching, we lost a third of our railways, and many towns and cities don't have any connection with the rail system. So you have no alternative but to the private car, if you live in a difficult place, that is. Now, we've got millions of people out of work. We've got a railway system at the moment where half the trains are all rattle traps. Certainly up in the north, we have these diesel railcar sets. Some of them look as though they can hardly move themselves. They're noisy, smelly, and uneconomical. And we have some dreadful old stations with no waiting rooms, no warmth, no protection from the elements. And yet we want to spend 30 billion on a railway which won't be ready till 2030 and which won't help our present situation in the slightest. It doesn't make any sense at the moment in our present circumstances. It would be very nice if we'd followed France years ago and started to build them then, and if we by now had a system equivalent to what they have in France, Germany, Spain and Italy. I mean, this government is always poo-pooing Europe, and yet they're streets ahead of us, light years ahead of us on the railways. Now, what could we do with 30 billion today which we could spend better than spending it on this high-speed railway line? They won't even start to build it for a good number of years. So it won't help jobs except some well-paid consultants. Well, what we can do with 30 billion, to begin with, we could go around where it's appropriate, and in many lines it is appropriate, and raise the bridges. Now, this may sound rather odd unless you're in the know, but our railway system is small compared to those on the continent. Our loading gauge, as it's called, which is the distance between the tracks and between the tops of the trains and the tops of bridges, is lower. So our railway carriages are smaller. Now, if we raised all the bridges, which is a big job, but you'd have to do it line by line. If we raised all the bridges, then you can have double-deck trains. If you can have double-deck trains, you double the capacity of those trains. You don't need to extend the platforms to take longer trains. You double the capacity overnight. So if we could do that on the busiest lines, then we can have not only double-deck trains for passengers, but we can carry the biggest containers, which they can't do at the moment on every line in the country, because different lines are built to different standards, slightly different standards. The West Coast Main Line, of course, is built to a better standard than some of the remote lines in Wales. That's one thing. The other thing we can do is electrify every inch of the track with overhead power and get rid of all the diesel rail cars and get rid of the third rail system down in the southeast and give every line in the country overhead power. If we do that, then you can have trains running from Land's End to John O'Groats, well, from Penzance to Wick or Thurso in the far north of Scotland. Faster, more economic, less damage to the track, better timekeeping, faster, and so on. We could improve the railway stations. I'll just give you one example. When you travel on Merseyrail, you come to little stations which have proper waiting rooms, which are heated, and which have electronic notice boards to tell passengers when the next train is due. And the trains are electric themselves. Now, if you go from Preston to Liverpool by train, when you get to Ormskirk, you have to change. You start off on an old rattletrap of a diesel rail car, trundle along a weed-covered track to Ormskirk, and when you get to Ormskirk, your train comes up against the buffers, and as you get out of the train, there's another set of buffers, and another train, another track starts. The two are not connected. And the new line from Ormskirk is electric. So the difference is like the difference between riding a bike and riding in a Rolls Royce. Now we could do all this with this 30 billion and start putting people back to work. And we would help to reduce the ridiculous fares that we've got on our railway lines. Well, I've waffled on. I hope you're listening, Mr. Cameron. It makes a lot of sense to improve what we've got before we start building something which only a few people will ever use. Because as I've told you, it'll be nearly £1,000 to travel on that train by then. And how many people want to travel 15 minutes quicker from London to Birmingham? That's all it will do, 15 minutes, maybe half an hour at most, and pay that kind of price. So, there you have it. Hope you are listening. Take care. God bless while it's still legal in the UK to say God bless. Bye for now.